All right, Tom, why don't we get started? Thank you all for joining us today, where Tom and I will be discussing how to master jobs to be done to practice effective product management. Tom and I are all both calling in remotely. I am located in Miami, Florida, and Tom, you're over in Texas today.
I am Austin, Texas. Yes.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who don't know us, my name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside, formerly 280 Group. I've been running Productside now for almost, can you believe it, Tom, 6 years. And we've really transitioned ourselves from being a training provider to providing transformation services for product teams. And Tom, why don't you give a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tom Evans, and I've been with Productside even longer than Rena. So 14, almost 14 years. And it's been fantastic working with companies around the world, helping them to implement better product management practices and really focus on helping them achieve better outcomes for their organization and for their customers. So excited to be here.
Yeah. And I remember, Tom, I think this was in 2018, where you and I talked about jobs to be done theory and we started teaching it in our classes.
Hmm.
And this is definitely one of the practices that I think product managers should return to over and over again because of just how great it is at changing your perspective on what you are building and who you're building for.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah. So before we get started with the actual webcast, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. Tom, if you could progress the slide.
Hmm.
So for those of you who don't know us, Productside, again, formerly 280 Group, we are an outcome-driven partner. What we do is help product teams build better products, products that people want to buy and use. And we teach them effective strategies such as using jobs to be done to craft those products. People work with us because of our solution approach. So we provide not just training, we provide consulting services and coaching to help our clients get results. And we also tailor our training programs to their context and to where their biggest gaps are in practicing effective product management. And finally, a lot of the people work with us because of people like Tom. We have a bench of invested experts who all come with decades of product management experience leading product teams and are also great mentors. So they are there really to share it with our clients. For those of you who want to stay connected with the community, consider joining our LinkedIn group. This is a group that has about 10,000 of similar peers, and we post tips and tricks for product leaders where you can discuss the importance of product management, how to do it at your jobs, and also don't forget the networking opportunities on LinkedIn. This is a QR code, and I think we're also going to be pasting a link for you to join our LinkedIn group right now. Please ask questions. I will be taking questions throughout this presentation. So if it's a relevant question, we will stop and try to answer it right then and there. There's also time for Q&A at the end of this session. I'll also take this time to answer the most common questions that we receive, which is, can I watch this later? And the answer is yes. All attendees and those who've registered will be receiving a link to watch the webcast after the recording has ended. So, Tom, why don't you kick it off with what we'll be
Uh,
discussing today?
okay, absolutely. So again, welcome everyone. We're going to first introduce you to the jobs to be done theory. So if you're not familiar with it, we'll introduce you to the core concepts. We'll talk about, some of the key lessons learned that I have picked up in terms of being successful in using it, and then we'll outline the steps to be able to go and really use jobs to be done in a practical way within your work. So first of all, we're going to talk about what is jobs to be done. And to kick that off, we actually have a poll. So the poll is, and we'll launch it here in just a second, but how familiar are you with the jobs to be done theory? And so this is my first time to hear of it. I've heard of it and I want to learn more. I have a conversational understanding, but haven't used it. And then the last one is I have been using it. So I've been applying it in my work. So love to see uh,
how familiar people are.
how familiar
Yeah.
everyone is with that. So,
Yeah. Well, I always think that I am familiar with it, and then I take a look again, and I feel like there's always something more to learn. But so far, we have some of the respondents coming in. About two-thirds have heard of it and want to learn more, and the rest have a conversational understanding, but haven't quite used it, which is great
mhm.
today because it will be covering exactly what you can do with jobs to be done.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you everyone who responded to that. And, I think as I, talk about jobs to be done, that's a pretty typical, scenario that we see in terms of, the understanding of the jobs to be done. And so let me tell you my story behind jobs to be done. And I first heard of it, jobs to be done, probably close to 13, 14 years ago. And I was already impressed, by the concept around it. But I don't think I've really fully understood it until I experienced this story that I'm going to share with you. And so, as a trainer and consultant, we do a fair amount of traveling so that we can do the on site training for our customers. And so as I was traveling, I noticed that, I get to the hotel, I pull my shirts out of my suitcase, and they were always going to be wrinkled. Well, fortunately, all hotels have an iron and an ironing board that I can use to iron my shirts. So I'd pull those out, I'd iron my shirts. And to be quite frankly, ironing shirts is a little bit boring to do. But here's what the real biggest challenge was is that these hotels did not have a convenient place to set up the ironing board and iron. There were always the electrical outlets, but they were either behind the desk or, between the beds or, in the bathroom. And that's not where I want to iron clothes. I want to do it out there in the main room where I can watch some TV while doing the ironing clothes. And so I kept talking in my classes about I wish hotels would understand the problems that I'm facing. If they would actually ask me about it, and do some voice of the customer. And I finally had somebody, and I said, all we have to do is put an outlet right there, and my problem would be solved. And so what I thought my problem was is the electrical outlet was in the wrong location. Well, somebody challenged me and they said, well, Tom, isn't that the solution? What is your problem? And we started talking about it. And I go, well, it's I want to have flexibility in where I set up the iron and the ironing board. So that raised it up to a little bit higher level in terms of, stating the problem. And it did open us up to maybe some other potential solutions. But even then, someone else finally challenged me again in terms of what the problem was. And so, what the problem was wasn't that I needed a better place to iron my shirts. What I really came to the conclusion was when I thought about it from a jobs to be done, it's not ironing clothes is the job that I want to accomplish, but I want to remove wrinkles from my clothes. And so that is really the way that we like to frame those jobs to be done. Well, there's also a social or an emotional side of that is I also want to look professional for my customers. Well, what were some of the pains that I was feeling? I was feeling, it took too long. It was difficult to set up. It was boring, but there were also some gains or some new outcomes that I could capture because of that. And that's having more time, for to prepare for my meetings or my training the next day. Of course, save money because I had alternatives. I could send it out to the hotel service to iron, but that's quite expensive. And in the end, be able to look more professional. So once I acknowledged and understood what my job really was, I discovered there was a whole new solution that I hadn't even thought of, which is downy wrinkle release. And so that really emphasizes the point of when we think about jobs to be done and use it in the proper way, it opens us up to new and potential solutions that we haven't even thought about. But our challenge, of course, is we often begin it with the solution already in mind, or we often constrain our a particular solution space in thinking about our problems that we need to focus on. So I love this quote from Clayton Christensen. Customers don't buy a product as much as they hire it to do a job that improves their lives in a particular way. And so if you think about what I was trying to do, it wasn't iron shirts. It was to get the wrinkles out of my shirts or to make me look more professional. And there's, several other quotes here that all relate to that same thing. Is I think too often we focus our thoughts in terms of the product that we sell, when in reality, it relates into the need that the customer is trying to address. And the jobs to be done is a great way for us to be able to state those needs in a way that gets us to focus much more on the problem area. Well, why should I care? Well, I think one that I've already talked to is too often as product teams, we jump to the solution space. And that is a natural tendency, both as product managers and working with others on our product team, to want to come up with solutions. And so we quickly jump into the solution space without really identifying or clearly stating the problem or need that we need to address. But here's the second thing is that I mentioned also, we often constrain our solutions to the solutions that we already are familiar with. And if we can think about it in the jobs to be done and really understand the needs of the customer, then that opens us up to a greater possibility of innovation. So if I had constrained myself to irons and ironing boards, then I would have never been able to have discovered that there's something else completely different out there to solve the problem. And that being the downy wrinkle release. So be able to focus on the job helps us look at other solutions that we might not actually have looked at.
And
Well,
Tom, I
yeah,
think,
go ahead.
yeah, Tom, just to that point, I think a lot of product management teams that we talk to where they tend to struggle in the feature factory zone is when they are given solutions to their from their stakeholders to go and develop. And that
Mm-hmm.
is one of the reasons why jobs to be done is kind of forces us to think, how do we turn that problem that product managers experience into a better, more effective product management discipline? And that is, go back to your stakeholders and ask them why.
Yeah,
Ask them
exactly.
for, draw
Mm-hmm.
out the problems that, because they're hiring you, product management team, to solve their problem. And so you can definitely use this to open up, like you're saying, more innovation at your company.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of these guidelines for success. So there's four areas that we're going to be talking about. And the first of these are to know the different types of jobs. So we've already introduced you to this idea, but there are three key types of jobs that we want to make sure that we are understanding. One is the core functional job. So what is the task that I'm trying to accomplish? What am I trying to get done within my work? But we can have emotional and social jobs also that we want to accomplish. And even if you are in a business to business world where you think emotional and social doesn't apply, it does, because everyone experiences emotional or social needs even within their work environment. And so understanding what those emotional social needs are as they relate to the core job is one way for us to help better understand what their needs are. And then there's the financial outcomes. And so whether I'm talking to a consumer market or I'm talking to a business to business market, often there is a financial benefit or a return on investment that we're trying to achieve. And so while all stakeholders may not have a vested interest in that financial outcome, it's important that we be thinking about what that financial outcome is as somebody is trying to accomplish a particular job. Now, it's also important for us to understand the specific circumstance. And so one of these that I think is interesting to look at is something as simple as breakfast. And so about a week and a half ago, I did a mini session of this at Product Camp Austin, and we did it more as an exercise. And the exercise that I presented to them is think about preparing breakfast for children. And out of that really came the context of understanding the circumstance, because it's not just preparing, breakfast for the kids. It depends upon the circumstance. And so if it's a regular weekday and one of your key goals is to, feed the kids nutritionally, but get them out the door quickly so that everyone gets to school on time, that's one circumstance. But what if it's a Saturday or Sunday morning, for a weekend when everybody's more relaxed, you have more time, you can invest more time in preparing breakfast. Maybe you have goals of more focused on the family time together versus rushing and getting everybody out the door. That is a different job because it applies in a different circumstance. But then we evaluated and thought about this even more. Who's the persona? Well, there's the parent, as one persona, but you need to think about the child also. Is it a, baby? Is it a toddler? Is it a teenager? That creates a different circumstance also that we need to make sure that we understand. And so don't assume just because you've applied it in one context that that job is the same job in all other circumstances. And so we want to peel the layers of this to make sure that we understand what those particular circumstances are.
So Tom, I think, and I think just earlier today, I saw an article come out about from the Wall Street Journal about how Equinox has these special lockers that you can pay extra money for, and that serves a social job of status, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could sell that to, okay, I'm going into my special locker and I have that set aside for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think B2C companies, because they are directly in contact with their users, have actually an easier job of understanding the emotional and social jobs. I'm curious, what do you think about B2B? Because I think sometimes we neglect the B2B, the buyer persona, social and emotional jobs, and they do have those.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good point, because in a lot of the things that we talk about, we give examples that are related to the user themselves.
Mhm.
And when you get the user to start telling a story around, the job and accomplishing it, you're going to start to see those emotion comes out also. And I think, as we think about the buyer, we can do the same thing is, get them to tell a story and reflect on it in a different way. And that may be about what's going on in their organization, not necessarily about them, but I believe you're going to get that emotion coming out at that point in time too. And probably, I think you want to explore that social aspect. If I, talk to I think this is a great example around here. This is, having conversations with senior executives, 10 years ago, you probably found a few who talked about the importance of making their company, look socially responsible, being green,
Mhm.
but it wasn't really, talked about in a strong depth. Now, in today's world, I think every executive is going to talk about that in some way, and I think that does start to connect in to that social and emotional side of it also. So how do you want your company to look? You know, because you're having this problem, how does that impact, the reputation, the brand around it? And I think you'll get some really strong perspectives associated to that. All right. Now, this is a really important aspect because I think often we think about the jobs change quickly as new technologies come along. But what we need to recognize is that it's not the job that is changing, it is the solution that is changing. And it's those solutions change and evolve because they help us achieve and do that job much better than what we have typically done in the past. And so one of the great questions to me is, did Apple create the need for the iPod? And I think many of us, might say, I didn't know I needed an iPod until Apple created it. But yet, if we look at the history behind music players, we'll first recognize that Apple was not the first portable digital music player. There were other companies out there creating MP3 players, as they were called, but they were clunky. They weren't user friendly. You had to have a deep understanding of some of the technical capabilities of it for you to be able to get the music onto it that you wanted to be able to get to it. So the lesson here is we want to detach the user from the product. And so just like we talked about in the ironing clothes situation, the product may have been the iron and the ironing board and the ability to do that, but that really wasn't the goal. The goal was to remove wrinkles. So if we think about the job to be done for, that the iPod addressed, and I present this in a solution agnostic way, I think I can present it as listen to your preferred music on the go. Well, we have had solutions for listening to your preferred music on the go for many years. Now, whether this is completely true or not, if I count on Monty Python and the Holy Grail for my music history, you know, the kings of the medieval time period and the royalty, they had minstrels that followed them around and played the music, that their preferred music while they were on the go. Well, yes, that addressed the job, but there were also some negative outcomes and maybe some less, things that they wanted to achieve that they couldn't achieve. And so, first of all, it was very expensive to do that. So only a few people could afford to be able to get a solution like that. Now, we jump ahead to the 1950s, and Westinghouse did something incredible as they introduced the portable radio. Now, for the first time, more of the masses could be able to take the music on the go that they wanted to be able to listen to. But even then, it had some challenges associated to it. I could listen to it as long as my battery was still working. I could select the channel that I wanted to listen to, so I could tune between different radio stations. But if they weren't playing the music that I wanted to listen to at that time, I might be stuck. Maybe I switch around to other channels, but I don't always get the music that I want to be able to listen to while on the go. So we advance forward again. And Sony introduced the Walkman in the early 1980s or late 1970s. And so now I could start carrying the music with me that I wanted to listen to while on the go. But I was limited on how much I could do because I could only carry maybe a couple of the cassette tapes. And so it limited how much of the music I could listen to while on the go. But it still was definitely a step forward. And yes, there were other evolutions in here, but we're jumping to the iPod, they're at the beginning of the 2000s. And now we had 1,000 songs in our pocket. So we were able to do this job much better than what we were able to accomplish before then. But as all of these products have been end of life at some time, so has Apple. And why? Or why has so has the iPod, not Apple, but the iPod. And why? It's because we are able to carry, almost infinite music with us on the go as long as we have a data connection on our smartphones. So I happen to use Spotify, and I'm able to listen to almost any music that I want to when I'm on the go. Plus, I can download a lot, and even if I don't have a data connection, I still have a large amount of music that I am able to listen to on the go. And so you start to see, while the basic job didn't change, the outcomes that we were able to achieve significantly improved over time. And so that's what drives new technologies and innovations is not that the job changes significantly, it's that our expectation, the outcomes that are available to us are really what drives forward and opens up these opportunities for innovations.
So I would say, however, Tom, if you can have your own portable DJ, that is quite a flex.
Well, yeah, that would be quite expensive, let's say. So, okay. So let's move into, the steps that we need to do to be able to define jobs to be able to be done. But before we do that, we want to do another poll question. And so the question here is what causes you to focus more on the solution space than on the problem space? Now we have four potential answers here. Even if it isn't perfectly aligned, choose the one that best applies to you. So number one, executives or other stakeholders describe the solution and we're expected to build it. So that's kind of the feature factory that Rina was talking about. We don't have a good innovation process. We don't spend enough time discovering market needs. And we hear what we think are needs, but we don't dig deep enough to understand the true need.
Yeah, and I'll call myself out, Tom, as an executive, even though I understand it's bad, we can't help but solutionize or provide solutions. So it's really about understanding that is a natural way that people talk when they are experiencing a frustration, but it's not necessarily the right way to do product management and really
Mm-hmm.
uncover the right solution.
Yeah.
All right, so we have the answers. It looks like a pretty even
It's
split.
pretty evenly split. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, these are all pretty common problems, so that does make sense.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that poll and move on into our last few slides before we go into the Q&A period. And so, as we look at these steps going forward, remember that first thing is really understanding the job. And so challenge yourself. Think about the core job. Explore that job at different levels of abstraction. So, if someone says the job is to iron clothes, well, challenge that. Well, what is it they're really trying to accomplish? What is the goal that they're trying to achieve? And that can force it up to a higher level. And then we can start breaking that job down into smaller steps because in a way, those are little mini jobs. And so in the breakfast example, preparing breakfast for kids, we didn't break it down all the way, but if I broke it down in just some of the next levels in it, one is decide what you're going to prepare. So there's a bit of a job that you need to think about in terms of, preparing the job or deciding what you're going to prepare. There's the preparation of it. There's the enjoyment of being able to eat the food. And then there's always the cleanup. And so if you start looking across those, for example, if my context is we're just trying to get everybody out the door so if we can get to school and work on time, cleanup may be something that is really important to us in terms of an outcome. Minimize that time to do cleanup. If it's a weekend, that may be less of an issue for me. So again, we start to see that context makes a difference. Well, let's explore that at levels of abstraction also. So there is the, prepare breakfast, but what is my goal? Well, I'm trying to, make sure my kids have proper nutrition. So, and then I could even raise it up is keep my kids healthy. So, I can explore those. Now, I'm not always saying you want to end up at the top level of abstraction, but I think it's important to go to explore those levels of abstraction so that you are knowing, yes, we're focusing on the right context in our particular situation. Then we want to understand what are those outcomes that our customers are trying to achieve as they complete this job. And we also talk about that in terms of the pains and gains. So if you remember the circle that I showed you when I talked about the job of removing wrinkles and what some of the pains and gains were, that's a great way for us to think about. And that actually relates to the outcomes. And then out of this, once we really understand those outcomes and maybe even prioritize those outcomes that our customers desire, that's going to help us better identify where those underserved needs are. And from that, we are now opening that door for us to be able to do more innovation. And so I mentioned this circle here. This was developed by Strategizer, and it's a great way, though, for us to do at a simple level to think about the jobs to be done. So one is, what persona are we talking about? What is the job that they're trying to accomplish in a specific context? And then when we think about those pains and gains, think about the outcomes. What are the negative outcomes that they're experiencing? What gets in the way of them being able to accomplish that job in the way that they would like to? And then we think about the gains. It's what does good look like? So it may not necessarily be that they are, feeling a pain, but yet they do know that there's good that would even help them, accomplish their goals and do it better. And so, Rena, I think you and I, the last time we talked about this, we talked about those often are where the delighters come from.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great to be able to go and, solve the pains, but we can also create delight if we're able to go and better achieve, some of these other outcomes that they expect or that they desire to achieve.
That's right. And I think, especially with delighters, that's another area that is really good to kind of just think about the social and emotional jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, just going back to the buyer persona, there's definitely I guess it's a social job of not wanting to be embarrassed with selecting a solution in front of their colleagues or wanting to feel
Mm-hmm.
like they've impressed someone. And so having delighters allows them to accomplish that kind of job versus just avoiding negative
Right.
outcomes doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. And Tom, before you go into the summary,
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Now, you've taught jobs to be done now to hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Where do you find people struggle with the most when they're just trying to learn how to do this?
The biggest struggle is really pulling themselves away from the solution space and the
Hmm.
solution space that they're already working in. And some of the exercises that we do in class, we challenge them around that so that, and what they do is when they go into their, breakout sessions and start working on these exercises, one of the things I'll always check in on at the end is, what were your challenge? And they kept saying, we tried to do it within the context of the solution that we already know. And so that's probably that biggest challenge, is pulling you away from that solution that you're already familiar with. All right, so we covered jobs to be done. We covered some key principles around it. One of those things that we talked about is that importance of keeping us in the problem space. So just going back into, what we were talking about is we want to move away from a specific solution and really kind of think about what are they trying to accomplish. And we're able to do that because jobs are stable over time. Those jobs don't change significantly. We want to make sure we understand that particular circumstance, because just because I describe the job one way in one circumstance doesn't necessarily mean the desired outcomes in a different circumstance are going to be identical. And of course, the final part is that this is where it starts to open us up to innovation. And when I talk about innovation, I'm not saying it has to be an incredible innovation like, the iPod was, or, some of the other great products that have been introduced, but they can be incremental innovation where we can take the products that we have now and add new capabilities in it or improve the experience that we offer. And we're able to do that because we're really thinking about the job that the customer is trying to accomplish versus being constrained by our solution. And so with that, uh, let us move on into the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. For our audience here, feel free to use either chat or the Q&A button to ask some questions. I have a few here to get us started. So, Tom, you mentioned there are various levels of distraction. So what do you recommend people do to get to the appropriate level of,
Yeah,
of abstraction? Yeah.
yeah, no, and that's that's a great question because I'll go back to my shirt example. And so, yes, while my job to be done was to remove the wrinkles, if I'm in a company that is about creating irons and ironing boards, and I don't have a chemical division in my company, I'm probably not going to move out of that context. And so I do have to think about the constraints that I'm working with in. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't step up to that higher level of abstraction just to acknowledge it and make sure that I'm aware of it, because that may open you up to different ways of thinking. But I still may be constrained by that context of, we are a company that make iron. So now I'm going to address it from that perspective. Another example, I was on a flight recently, and as I was, pulling down the overhead bin, I noticed on each end of the bin were mirrors. And it got me thinking about this at levels of abstraction. Well, I could abstract it up to, my job, the job the passenger is making sure is to make sure they take care of their carry-on luggage. Um, but there's a context you're in. You're not able to come in and completely do anything to solve that problem of passengers, the negative outcome of passengers sometimes leave things in the overhead bins. And of course, that creates problems for the passengers. It creates problems for the airlines. But I have a context I have to work within, and that is we're on airplanes. I can't change that. And so that again is that level of abstraction to where, okay, here's the specific context that I'm in. I'm constrained by the fact that I'm in an airplane, that there are overhead bins. Yes, I may want to innovate the whole, storage system, but I'm not in that context right now. I just need to fix this problem. And so that's where, you want to move back and forth in those levels of abstraction and be able to identify this is the right level for us to work in.
Yeah. And Tom, going back to the ironing board example, I think jobs to be done is also one of those, I think, techniques that is very useful if you're a product designer as well, not just a product manager, because just thinking about the outlets in hotel rooms, I
Mm-hmm.
wish somebody would apply jobs to be done to the location of those outlets too. It's different.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. I've moved in. I've been in some of the hotels that have been updated as such, and you know they there'll be drawers to be able to store clothes in, but they're like at the lowest level possible. I go,
Mhm.
no, I'm sorry, you don't understand my context here. I'm not wanting to lean over and having to search through those. I want this up here on the level. And so I think there's definitely understanding that job to be done within that specific context. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, to that point, though, we all have our own individual experience of what we would, what is my job to be done and what is my
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
experience. So, from a product manager's perspective, they want to go out and find out the jobs to be done for a market,
Correct.
uncover unmet
Mm-hmm.
needs across a large number of customers. So, how do you, or what do you recommend from a product manager standpoint of, especially when you're in a situation and you personally feel a frustration, to validate that that is truly a job to be done by a larger group of users?
This goes back to the voice of the customer that we've been that we teach as a foundational aspect of of our work, and that is taking the time to go out and do that voice of the customer. And so if I have a hypothesis around what I believe the job to be done is and what I believe the desired outcomes are, that is the negative outcomes they're experienced and the desired, I want to go and use that voice of the customer as a way to validate that. Now, I need to be careful that I don't go and lead them and into the path that I want them to go into. And so I'll start out as a different level of abstraction around there. I'll make sure that, maybe I set up a bit of the context, or maybe I keep it fairly broad. And then as they start walking through, the job, what they want to be able to accomplish, I can ask those questions. And one of the questions that was posted here is, what are some of the tools that we can use? And the 5 whys are a great way of doing that. And so, well, what is it, and this is where I won't necessarily ask why. Why are you trying to do that? But I could rephrase it of what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal that you're trying to achieve? How do you measure success as you are trying to do that? What gets in your way? And so all of those types of questions are great ways for us to be able to, you know, dig in deeper around that.
Yeah, and I would also say to Breck, thank you for asking the question, is there's also a validation process that you need to go after you've identified a potential job. And
Mm-hmm.
so just say this is the job, let's solve for it. You then have to you should devise a hypothesis where you can cheaply test how prevalent is it in the market, and will people actually pay for us to or pay to hire the solution that we are proposing as well. So there's
Mm-hmm.
other things that you absolutely need to do.
Yep.
Okay, so oh, sorry, did you?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so what happens in the situation that we kind of brought up earlier in this discussion where sales comes to you with just, I want this solution done? What do you do in that case?
So there's a couple challenges focused around that. I can tell you what you can do, but you also have to appreciate the context of that situation you're in. And the first thing is I would ask the questions, well, can you tell me more about that? Can you give me a little bit more of what the customer is trying to accomplish? What problem are they trying to solve? What are they, what's their goal that they're trying to get to? And I would try to, reframe it in that type of discussion. Now, here's the challenge that you face with this is that if your sales team or your executive team, the model that has become acceptable with the organization is we ask and product delivers, you're going to get some pushback on that. And so, the first time you do that, you might want to do it with someone that you have a really good working relationship with, where they understand what you're trying to accomplish. Because you can do it in a way that somebody feels like you know you're insulting them, or and so what you want to be careful about the context of that situation. But yeah, use those questions that we've been talking about from the very beginning. Tell me more about that. And of course, part of my goal would be, hey, could I talk to the customer? Um, but yeah, there's some culture issues that you have to make sure that you're able to work through when that happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying, Tom. And I'll just add that I think that it culturally, product management and sales needs to build trust with each other. And one way to do that is to not just engage them in this, like, tell me more or tell me why you think that,
Mm-hmm.
but also down the line, I think that there's a lot of trust that can be built if there's a feedback loop on what happened
Yep. Mm-hmm.
afterwards. So getting that information, then bringing back the insights after you've made some kind of decision around, like, okay, this was actually the problem, we validated it, or we didn't, and here's why. And bringing that information back to the sales team can help you have trust and then have more effective conversations moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we have time for just one more question, and that has to do. So we've seen this in a number of different. So I can personally say, in talking to product leaders, this is often a challenge: is actually getting access to customers. And how could you convince management or other departments that access to customers to do this valuable voice of the customer research and applied jobs to be done theory is worth it? So, do
Mm-hmm.
you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, no, this has come up in classes multiple times. And, the first thing, and it goes back to a little bit of what I said, is that we have to establish credibility. And, if I say I want to speak to customers, but I don't have a good plan in place, my sales team may not be willing to let me do that. And so I think the first thing is I need to put a good plan in place. And one of the tools that we developed a couple of years ago was a voice of the customer guide, where it gives you some really nice steps in terms of how do you structure a voice of the customer. And if you're able to present that to your sales team and say, here are the things that I want to be able to learn, here's the approach I'm going to take, that starts to create a level of confidence. But the second part of that is that even if I can do that, I may not have the trust of everybody on the sales team. And so, part of my work is let's pick a few of the sales team members and establish those relationships, build those relationships, build that trust relationship to where they're willing to say, oh, I know you well enough, Tom. I want to invite you to, talk to some of my customers. And then, once you show that that is effective and that has value associated with it, then you're able to go and build on top of that and expand to more of it. So it's not like you're going to get everyone to buy in all at once, but you just have to walk through a change management process to get there.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I have seen it pretty successful. I've talked to product leaders where they have a strategy where they do build trust over time with sales leaders, but they also try to engage, see if their past like closed lost prospects, past prospects might engage with the company again just by asking them, "Hey, do you mind talking with my product manager? Because we'd really find your feedback valuable for our solution."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then starting those conversations may actually provide value back to the sales team. So that's just another way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We had a nice discussion here about jobs to be done and how to start applying it at your companies. For those of you who just joined us, we have a surprise or a special, Tom, if you could advance the slide.
Yep.
A special offer today for everybody who has joined us. Please use this QR code, take a picture, and submit your information to enter to win a free Productside playbook. So this playbook is 22 templates that come with instructions, and they are based off of our Productside blueprint. And they are also used in our courses today to help people become fantastic product managers. So this is just a special just for the folks who are joining us today.
And that
And
and it does include jobs to be done in it. So
that's right.
yeah.
So you can practice what you've learned today. And also for those of you who are interested in joining our optimal product management class with our wonderful instructors, we have a special off, $500 off all of our live instructor-led classes. Today, just use the code jobs to be done 500 to get 500 off.
All right.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. And Tom, I always love doing these webinars with you. I learn something new every time. And as always, to our community, please continue to let us know what topics and questions you have that are interesting for us to explore, either in webinar format on our podcast or in our content on our website. Visit us at productside.com for more of this content.